In the pre-dawn quiet of March 8, 2014, the world was unknowingly on the precipice of the greatest aviation mystery in history. A machine built to conquer the skies, a testament to human ingenuity and precision, was about to become a ghost. It carried 139 souls, each with a story, a destination, a life waiting for them. But their journey would end not at an arrival gate, but in a void of unanswered questions. This is the story of a flight that simply vanished. A story of a search that would push the boundaries of technology and human endurance. And a story of the silence left behind by Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. The journey began like countless others at Kuala Lumpur International Airport, a bustling hub connecting worlds. At Gate C1, a Boeing 777-200, registration 9 MMRO, sat gleaming under the floodlights. This aircraft was a veteran of the skies, delivered new to Malaysia Airlines in May of 2002. It had completed over 7,500 flights and clocked more than 53,000 hours in the air. The Boeing 777, the 777, was and remains one of the safest and most reliable airliners ever built. With its two powerful Rolls-Royce Trent engines and a near-perfect safety record across the global fleet, it was the workhorse of long-haul travel. On this night, it was scheduled for a routine red-eye flight, a near 6-hour trip north to Beijing Capital International Airport. In the cockpit, two men were responsible for the lives of everyone on board. The man in the left-hand seat was 53-year-old Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a father of 3. Zahari was more than just a pilot. He was a passionate aviator. He joined Malaysia Airlines in 1981 and had amassed a staggering 365 hours of flying experience. His colleagues described him as a superb pilot, an expert who loved teaching others. At home, his passion for flight was so profound that he had painstakingly built a highly sophisticated flight simulator, a near-perfect replica of a 777 cockpit, to practice his craft even in his off hours. He was the epitome of a seasoned, trustworthy commander. Beside him in the right-hand seat was his first officer, 27-year-old Farid Abdul Hamid. Though much younger, Farid was on the cusp of a major career milestone. He had joined the airline in 2007 and had already logged over 2,700 flying hours. This flight, MH370 to Beijing, was a special one for him. It was his final check flight, the last leg of his transition training to become a fully certified pilot on the Boeing 777. By all accounts, he was a good-natured, well-liked young man with a promising future, the son of a high-ranking civil servant. He was reportedly engaged to be married to a fellow pilot from another airline. As the pilots ran through their meticulous pre-flight checklists, the 227 passengers began to board. They were a microcosm of our interconnected world, a diverse collection of individuals from more than a dozen countries, their paths converging for this single, fateful journey. The largest contingent by far was a group of 153 Chinese nationals. Many were tourists returning from sunny holidays in Malaysia. Among them was a celebrated delegation of 19 Chinese artists, including painters and calligraphers, who were returning home after showcasing their work at an exhibition in Kuala Lumpur. They had posed for a group photo before leaving, a poignant final image of collective creativity and joy. There were 38 Malaysians on board, and citizens from Indonesia, Australia, India, and France. There were families with young children, couples on vacation, and professionals on business. Each seat held a story. There was 50-year-old Philip Wood, an American IBM executive from Texas, a father of 2 who was relocating to Beijing. His girlfriend, Sarah Bajk, eagerly awaited his arrival. His last text to her was a simple expression of love and the relief of not having missed his flight. There was Paul Weeks, a 38-year-old New Zealand mechanical engineer and a father to 2 young boys. He was leaving his family in Perth, Australia, to start a new, well-paying job in Mongolia, a sacrifice he was making to build a better life for them after they had lost their home in the Christchurch earthquake. Before he boarded, He gave his wedding ring and watch to his wife, Danica, for safekeeping, telling her that if anything should happen to him, she should give the watch to their first son and the ring to their second when they grew up. There was Chandrika Sharma, a 51-year-old director of a non-profit organization from India, on her way to a United Nations conference. A tireless advocate for fishing communities, she was a voice for the vulnerable. And there was a French couple, Laurence Waterloo and her teenage son and daughter, on their way to join their husband and father who had recently moved to Beijing for work. They were starting a new chapter of their lives together. The cargo hold, too, was filled with the mundane commerce of the globe. Along with passenger baggage, it carried a shipment of tropical mangosteens and a detail that would later draw intense scrutiny: a consignment of 221 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries. At 12:42 a.m. local time on Saturday, March 8th, with all passengers and crew on board and all checks complete, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 pushed back from the gate. The cabin lights dimmed. The safety demonstration played. The aircraft taxied to runway 32R, with a final clearance from the control tower. Captain Zahari and First Officer Farik advanced the throttles. The massive Rolls-Royce engine spooled up with a thunderous roar, and the fully laden Boeing 777 began its powerful roll down the illuminated runway. It lifted gracefully into the dark Malaysian sky, its navigation lights blinking, and began its climb towards the northeast, towards Beijing. Everything was perfectly normal. For the next 40 minutes, the flight proceeded exactly as planned. The aircraft climbed smoothly to its assigned cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The seatbelt sign was switched off. In the cabin, passengers would have been settling in for the night, some reclining their seats to sleep, others watching movies on the seat-back screens, a few perhaps gazing out the window at the dark expanse of the South China Sea below. The flight attendants would have been preparing the overnight service. On the flight deck, communication with air traffic control was routine and professional. The aircraft was communicating with controllers on the ground through voice radio and to vital data link systems. The first was its transponder, a device that broadcasts the aircraft's unique identity, altitude, and position to civilian secondary radar. The second was the Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, or ACARS, which automatically sends short data messages, including engine performance and fuel status, back to the airline's maintenance base. At 1:01 a.m., the crew of MH370 radioed to say they had reached flight level 350. 6 minutes later, at 1:07 a.m., the ACARS system sent its last automated report. After this point, for reasons still unknown, the system was disabled. The aircraft was now approaching the edge of Malaysian controlled airspace, nearing the navigational waypoint IGARI, where it would be handed over to Vietnamese air traffic control in Ho Chi Minh City. At 1:19 a.m., the controller at the Kuala Lumpur Area Control Center radioed the flight with a final routine instruction. The exchange was brief, professional, and utterly unremarkable. The Kuala Lumpur controller said, "Malaysian 370. Contact Ho Chi Minh 1-0.9. Good night, Macom." Clear voice responded from the cockpit of MH370. The voice is believed to be that of First Officer Farik Hamid. He replied, "Good night, Malaysian 370." These were the last words ever heard from the flight. They were spoken without any hint of stress, any sign of trouble. They were the words of a crew operating a normal flight on a normal night. But what happened next was anything but normal. Just 2 minutes after that final peaceful sign-off, at precisely 1:21 a.m., something happened aboard the Boeing 777. The aircraft's transponder, the electronic beacon that was broadcasting its position to air traffic control, abruptly stopped transmitting. On the radar screens at Kuala Lumpur and on the screens of Vietnamese controllers who were expecting the plane to check in, the data block for MH370 simply blinked out. It vanished. In the control towers, there was no immediate panic. Transponders can occasionally fail. Sometimes, a flight crew might be slow to switch frequencies during a handover. The Vietnamese controller in Ho Chi Minh City saw the plane disappear from his screen right at the moment he expected it to make contact. He tried calling them. There was no response. He tried again and again. Only silence. He then reached out to his Malaysian counterparts in Kuala Lumpur to ask if the plane had turned back or if they were still in contact with it on a different frequency. Here, in these crucial minutes, a fatal gap of confusion and inaction opened up. For nearly 20 minutes, controllers in both countries seemed to operate under the assumption that the other had the plane. Official reports would later describe a breakdown in coordination, a failure to quickly raise the alarm that a 250-ton airliner had gone electronically dark at a critical handover point by 1:38 a.m., 17 minutes after the plane had vanished from radar. Ho Chi Minh City made its first official query to Kuala Lumpur. By the time a proper alert was triggered and the gears of a search and rescue operation began to grind into motion, Flight 370 was long gone. The question was, where? The logical starting point. The only starting point was the place where it was last seen, a patch of the South China Sea, midway between Malaysia and Vietnam. As the sun rose on March 8th, the world began to wake up to the bewildering news. An airliner was missing. The families of the passengers who had gone to Beijing's airport to greet their loved ones were the first to face the unfolding nightmare. Instead of joyful reunions, they were corralled into a hotel conference room, their faces etched with confusion and a dawning, sickening fear. Their wait had just begun. The initial search was a massive, multinational affair. Ships and aircraft from Malaysia, Vietnam, China, Singapore, the Philippines, and the United States converged on the Gulf of Thailand and the South China Sea. The search area was vast, the task monumental. For days, the world was gripped by the hunt. Every scrap of information was analyzed, every potential clue scrutinized. The hope was for a quick discovery, for wreckage, for black boxes, for answers. But the sea yielded nothing. The search turned up a series of cruel false hopes. Vietnamese search planes spotted to long, parallel oil slicks, each several miles long. Samples were taken, but they were found to be from shipping fuel, not jet fuel. Then, a Chinese satellite released images showing 3 large, floating objects in the search area. Hopes surged. Ships and planes were diverted to the coordinates, only to find nothing. The objects were likely just sea trash, their significance amplified by desperation. As the search in the water came up empty, the investigation on the ground intensified, and it soon produced a shocking revelation. Interpol confirmed that the passengers on board had used stolen passports, an Austrian passport and an Italian passport, both reported stolen in Thailand years earlier, had been used to board Flight 370. The news electrified the media. The spectre of terrorism, a 9/11-style hijacking, immediately became the dominant theory. Who were these 2 men? Were they part of a larger plot? Had they stormed the cockpit and taken control of the plane? The investigation into the 2 mystery passengers became a global priority. Within days, intelligence agencies, including the FBI, had identified them. They were not terrorists. They were 2 young Iranian men, 18 and 29 years old, who were likely seeking asylum in Europe. Their tickets had been purchased by an Iranian contact known as Mr. Oli, who confirmed they had no links to any extremist groups. They were simply economic migrants, taking a desperate and illegal path to a new life. While it highlighted serious lapses in airport security, no one had checked the passports against Interpol's stolen document database. It seemed to rule out a coordinated terrorist plot as the primary cause of the disappearance. The mystery only deepened. If it wasn't terrorism, what was it? Catastrophic mechanical failure, a sudden explosion. But the Boeing 777 is built with immense redundancy. Even a double-engine failure wouldn't cause it to simply vanish. A catastrophic structural failure or explosion would have left a vast, immediate debris field, which the intensive search had failed to find. And in any of these scenarios, the pilots would have had at least a few seconds to send a distress call. But from MH370, there was only silence. Then, just as the investigation seemed to have hit a dead end, A stunning new piece of information emerged from the Malaysian military, and it changed everything. While civilian air traffic control relies on transponders, military defense systems use what is known as primary radar. Primary radar is less precise, but it works by bouncing radio waves off objects in the sky. It doesn't need a cooperating transponder. And on the night of March 8th, a Malaysian military radar station had tracked an unidentified aircraft after MH370's transponder went silent. The track was chilling. The unidentified aircraft, which the authorities were now almost certain was the missing Flight 370, did not continue on its path to Beijing. Instead, moments after its transponder was switched off, it made a sharp, deliberate turn to the southwest, flying back across the Malay Peninsula. It flew over the northern state of Penang and then banked again, turning northwest up the Strait of Malacca, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. The military tracked this ghost plane for over an hour before it flew beyond the range of their radar, out over the Andaman Sea. The implications were staggering. This was not a plane that had suffered a sudden, catastrophic accident. The turn was not the act of a disabled aircraft drifting off course. It was a controlled, intentional maneuver, flown along navigational waypoints. It meant that someone was flying the plane, someone with knowledge of aviation, someone who wanted to disappear. The search area in the South China Sea, where the world's attention had been focused for a week, was now irrelevant. The plane had been on the other side of the country. A new, massive search was launched in the Strait of Malacca and the Andaman Sea. The investigation now pivoted from searching for an accident to hunting for a perpetrator, and the suspicion, however unthinkable, fell squarely on the two men who had the most knowledge and control: Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah and First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid. Who was in control of that plane, and why would they fly it into oblivion? The lives of the pilots were now placed under an intense microscope. Police raided their homes. Investigators sought to build a psychological profile of each man, searching for any sign of stress, any personal or financial problems, any political or religious extremism that could point to a motive. Captain Zahari, the respected veteran, became a figure of intense speculation. His home flight simulator, once a symbol of his passion, was confiscated and analyzed by the FBI. Had he used it to practice this very route into oblivion? Initial reports suggested he had. Investigators found deleted flight path data points on the simulator's hard drive that, when pieced together, appeared to trace a course into the remote southern Indian Ocean, a route eerily similar to the one the plane was now suspected of having taken. However, the Malaysian government later stated that while there were thousands of waypoints stored on the simulator, there was no evidence they were linked to a rehearsed suicide mission. Friends and family defended Zahari passionately, portraying him as a kind, gentle family man, incapable of such a monstrous act. Yet the cloud of suspicion lingered. First Officer Farik Hamid also came under scrutiny. An Australian news program aired an interview with two South African women who claimed Farik and another pilot had invited them into the cockpit for the duration of a flight from Phuket to Kuala Lumpur in 2011. They provided photos showing themselves in the cockpit with the pilots, a serious breach of post-9/11 security rules. While it spoke to a potential lack of judgment, it was hardly evidence of a plot to hijack an airliner 3 years later. His family described the media portrayal as a character assassination of a good, religious young man who was excited about his career and his upcoming marriage. The investigation was now chasing the phantom corridors of flight, one leading northwest over Asia, the other southwest over the ocean. But there was another piece of the electronic puzzle, another ghostly handshake from the missing plane that would soon narrow the search from impossibly vast to simply immense, and point the hunt towards one of the most remote and desolate places on the face of the Earth. While the transponder and the ACARS system had been deliberately disabled in the cockpit, the designers of the Boeing 777 had installed another, more passive communication system. It was the Satellite Data Unit, or SDU, located in the electronics bay of the aircraft. Even when other systems were off, as long as the SDU had power, It was programmed to automatically respond to a ping or status check from a satellite orbiting high above the Indian Ocean. The satellite belonged to Inmarsat, a British satellite telecommunications company. In the days after the disappearance, as engineers at Inmarsat reviewed their logs, they made an extraordinary discovery. For 6 hours after MH370 vanished from military radar over the Andaman Sea, its satellite data unit had continued to answer these hourly pings. It was like a faint, electronic heartbeat, proving the plane was still intact and powered, flying for hours after the world believed it was lost. The last of these pings was recorded at 8:11 a.m. Malaysian time, a full 7 hours and 30 minutes after its last voice communication. The pings did not contain any GPS data. They couldn't tell the engineers where the plane was, but they could measure the time it took for the signal to travel from the satellite to the aircraft and back. By calculating this round-trip time, they could determine the distance between the satellite and the plane at the moment of each ping. This allowed them to draw a series of concentric rings on a map. At 8:11 a.m., the aircraft was somewhere on a vast arc of possible locations. Then, the engineers made another breakthrough by analyzing the tiny frequency shift in the signal, a phenomenon known as the Doppler effect. Similar to how the pitch of a siren changes as it moves towards or away from you, they could determine something crucial. They could tell if the plane had been moving north or south. The analysis pointed overwhelmingly in one direction. On March 15th, 1 week after the plane vanished, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Najib Razak, stood before the world's media at a dramatic press conference. His words confirmed the world's worst fears and simultaneously launched the most challenging search operation ever conceived. He confirmed that the plane's communication systems had been deliberately disabled. He confirmed that its flight path after leaving Malaysian airspace was consistent with deliberate action by someone on the plane. And he confirmed, based on the groundbreaking Inmarsat data, that the plane had continued to fly for more than 6 additional hours. He then revealed the two great arcs, the two possible flight corridors dictated by the final satellite ping. A northern arc, stretching from northern Thailand up to the border of Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, and a southern arc, stretching from near Indonesia down into the vast, empty wilderness of the southern Indian Ocean. The northern corridor seemed implausible. To fly that route, MH370 would have had to cross the airspace of numerous countries, including China, India, and Pakistan, all with sophisticated military radar systems. It seemed impossible that a rogue jumbo jet could have passed through undetected. That left only one terrifying alternative: the southern corridor, a path that led the aircraft over thousands of miles of open ocean far from any land, any shipping lanes, any radar coverage, a path to nowhere. The Prime Minister announced that the search operations in the South China Sea and the Strait of Malacca were being terminated. The hunt for Flight 370 was being refocused on the two new, enormous corridors. The families of the passengers, who for a week had clung to the hope that the plane might have landed safely at an undisclosed location, were now confronted with a devastating new reality. The hope that their loved ones were alive was dwindling, replaced by the ghastly image of the plane flying for hours on a lonely, automated course until its fuel finally ran out. A few days later, on March 24th, after further refinement of the satellite data, the Prime Minister made another, even more somber announcement. Based on Inmarsat's analysis, he declared that Flight 370's last known position was in the middle of the southern Indian Ocean, west of Perth, Australia. There was no possibility of a landing. With deep sadness and regret, he stated that Malaysia Airlines had concluded that Flight 370 was lost and that none of those on board had survived. For the families, it was a brutal, heartbreaking conclusion delivered via a press conference and a text message from the airline. Their grief was immense, now compounded by anger at the way the news was delivered. Without any physical evidence, any wreckage to prove it, the search for answers had now become a search for a final resting place. The focus of the world shifted to a remote, storm-tossed patch of ocean known as the Roaring Forties for its ferocious winds and colossal waves. The Australian Maritime Safety Authority, AMSA, took the lead in coordinating the new surface and air search. The task was Herculean. The search area was over 1,500 miles off the coast of Perth, at the very limit of a search plane's range. The weather was treacherous with low clouds, gale-force winds, and mountainous seas that could swallow debris in an instant. Once again, a multinational fleet of advanced search aircraft P-8 Poseidons, P-3 Orions from Australia, the United States, New Zealand, China, Japan, and South Korea flew daily sorties into the desolate expanse. They were hunting for any sign of wreckage, any clue floating on the surface, and once again, the ocean played a cruel game of hide-and-seek. Satellite imagery from various countries began to identify potential debris. A Chinese satellite spotted a large object 22 meters long. An Australian satellite found two other objects. A French satellite detected a field of 120 potential objects. Each discovery made headlines. Each discovery sent ships and planes racing to the coordinates, and each time they found nothing. The objects were dismissed as lost shipping containers, sea junk, or even marine life, their appearance distorted by the satellite's lens. The debris was always just out of reach. Phantom evidence in a ghost story. The best hope for finding the main wreckage lay in locating the underwater locator beacons attached to the plane, EST black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder, and the flight data recorder. These beacons were designed to emit an ultrasonic ping for at least 30 days after being submerged in water, but their battery life was finite. The clock was ticking. The search vessels were now equipped with towed pinger locators, highly sensitive hydrophones designed to listen for the faint signal from the black boxes, possibly lying on a seabed more than 2 miles deep. On April 5th, nearly a month after the disappearance, came the most promising lead of the entire search. An Australian naval vessel, the Ocean Shield, towing a US Navy pinger locator, detected a distinct pulsing signal. The signal's frequency was 33.3 kHz, very close to the 37.5 kHz frequency specified for black box beacons. The crew on the Ocean Shield was ecstatic. They had a ping. The signal was stable and consistent. A few hours later, they detected it again, and 2 days later, they detected two more signals from a location several miles away, consistent with there being two separate black boxes. The signals came from a depth of roughly 1,500 meters or 15,000 feet. For the first time, it seemed the search had been narrowed from a vast ocean arc to a specific, defined patch of the seafloor. The world held its breath. It felt like the beginning of the end of the mystery. But the pings, which had offered so much hope, soon faded. After April 8th, they were not heard again. The beacon batteries had likely died. Now, the search would have to go silent and deep. The mission was handed over to a robotic submarine, an autonomous underwater vehicle called the Bluefin 21. Its job was to slowly scour the seafloor with sonar, creating a detailed map of the seabed in the area where the pings were heard, searching for the telltale wreckage of a Boeing 777. The terrain it faced was formidable. The seafloor was not flat, it was a rugged, hostile landscape of underwater volcanoes, ridges, and deep, silt-filled trenches, more challenging than the surface of the moon. The Bluefin 21 was pushed to the very limits of its operational depth. Its first mission had to be aborted after it exceeded its maximum depth rating of 4,500 meters. For weeks, the robotic sub methodically crisscrossed the designated search area, a patch of seafloor roughly the size of a small city. It dove, it scanned, it surfaced to download its data. The world watched, analyzing every sonar image released by the search authorities. But the images revealed only the natural, rugged geology of the Uppsala plain. There was no twisted metal, no sign of an aircraft, no debris field. By the end of May 2014, the Bluefin 21 had completed its search of the area defined by the acoustic pings. It had found absolutely nothing. The conclusion was as stunning as it was disheartening. The pings, the most concrete lead in the entire investigation, the sounds that had focused the world's most advanced search technology on a single spot, were likely a ghost signal, a red herring produced by a fault in the ship's electronics, or some other unexplained acoustic anomaly. The search was back at square one. The disappearance of Flight 370 had now spiraled into a multi-layered enigma. What happened in the cockpit that night? Who was in control? Why were the communication systems turned off? Why the deliberate turn back across Malaysia? And where did the plane fly during those 6 silent hours? The failure of the deep-sea search only added another layer to the puzzle. Where was the wreckage? The southern Indian Ocean is vast, but the Inmarsat data, which had been peer-reviewed and deemed sound, had provided a specific, if long, path. How could a 200-foot-long airliner, even in pieces, remain so completely hidden? As the initial underwater search ended in failure, the investigation entered a new, longer-term phase. Authorities acknowledged that they had likely been searching in the wrong place. A new, comprehensive analysis of the satellite data was undertaken, re-examining every assumption. The result was the definition of a new, much larger search area, a 120,000 square kilometer arc of ocean floor further south along the 7th arc, the line representing the plane's likely position at the time of the final satellite ping. This would be the underwater search, an unprecedented effort of technology and perseverance. It would last for years and cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But as the months turned into a year, and then two, the silence from the deep remained unbroken. For the families of the 239 people on board, the limbo was an unbearable torture. Without a crash site, without a single piece of confirmed debris, there could be no closure, only a gaping wound of uncertainty. They campaigned tirelessly, demanding the search continue, refusing to let the world forget the names and faces of their loved ones. They questioned the official narrative, pointing to what they saw as inconsistencies and a lack of transparency from the Malaysian government. The information vacuum gave rise to a torrent of alternative theories, from the plausible to the outlandish. Had the plane been shot down? Was it a cyber hijacking, with the plane controlled remotely? Did it secretly fly north and land at a hidden airfield? Was it carrying sensitive, undeclared cargo that made it a target? Each theory was a desperate attempt to impose some kind of logic onto an event that seemed to defy all rational explanation. Then, 16 months after the plane vanished, on July 29, 2015, on the other side of the world, the ocean finally gave up its first secret. On a beach on Reunion, a small French island in the western Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from the search area, a man cleaning the shoreline discovered a large piece of wreckage washed ashore. It was a section of an aircraft's wing, about 2 meters long. It was encrusted with barnacles. On it was a stenciled number 657 BB. Aviation experts quickly identified it. It was a flaperon, a control surface on the trailing edge of a Boeing 777's wing. The part number was traced. It belonged to the aircraft with the registration 9MMRO. After 515 days of searching, the first physical proof of Flight 370 had been found. It confirmed that the plane had indeed gone down, and ocean current models showed that it was plausible for debris from the southern Indian Ocean search area to drift all the way to the coast of Africa. The discovery was a watershed moment, yet it provided few new answers about the core mystery. In fact, analysis of the flaperon deepened the intrigue. Investigators determined that it was likely in a retracted or neutral position at the time of impact, suggesting there was not an active attempt to ditch the plane in a controlled landing on the water. It was more consistent with an aircraft falling from the sky in an uncontrolled, high-speed dive. Over the next 2 years, more than 20 other pieces of debris, confirmed or highly likely to be from MH370, would wash up on the coastlines of Mozambique, Tanzania, Madagascar, and South Africa. A section of an engine cowling, a piece of an interior cabin panel, a fragment of a Rolls-Royce logo. Each piece was another small, heartbreaking confirmation of the plane's fate, another tangible link to the 239 lost souls. But none of them could tell the world the one thing it needed to know. Why? They were scattered clues from a crime scene the size of an ocean. A crime scene whose main body has never been found. The black boxes with their precious data and cockpit recordings remain where they have been for over a decade, lost in the crushing, silent darkness of the abyss, holding their secrets close. The Disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 is a wound that has not healed, a story without an ending, a chilling reminder that even in our hyper-connected world, it is still possible to simply vanish without a trace. The discovery of the Flight on Reunion Island was a seismic shift in the story of MH370. For 515 agonizing days, the flight had been a ghost, a phantom of data points and satellite arcs. Now, it was real. It had a physical dimension. This single piece of wreckage, bleached by the sun and colonized by the sea, was a tangible messenger from a watery grave. It ended the most outlandish theories of a secret landing in a remote desert or a shadowy hangar. The plane had met its end in the ocean, but in answering one question, the Flight posed a dozen more, pulling investigators into a complex forensic puzzle where every clue seemed to deepen the enigma. French authorities took possession of the wreckage, flying it to a specialized military laboratory in Toulouse for analysis. Every detail was scrutinized, the marine life clinging to its surface. A specific species of gooseneck barnacle offered a potential clue. Marine biologists could estimate the age of the barnacles, giving them a rough idea of how long the piece had been adrift. More importantly, the water temperature required for that species to grow helped confirm that the debris had indeed drifted from the cold, remote southern Indian Ocean across the equator to the warmer waters where it was found. The science of the sea was confirming the science of the satellites, but it was the physical state of the Flight that sparked the most intense debate. A debate that continues to this day. The key question was about its position at the moment of impact. Was it extended as it would be for a landing or a slow speed, controlled ditching attempt, or was it retracted in the normal cruise position, suggesting the plane was not under active control when it hit the water? The investigators in France, along with the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, or ATSB, concluded from the damage patterns that the Flight was most likely retracted. The implications were chilling. A retracted Flight pointed towards a high-speed, uncontrolled impact, a death dive. It suggested a scenario where the crew was incapacitated, perhaps through hypoxia from a slow decompression, and the plane flew on autopilot for hours as a ghost ship, until its fuel was exhausted and it spiraled into the sea. Or it could point to a deliberate, suicidal plunge from cruising altitude. What it did not seem to support was the theory of a skilled pilot attempting a gentle, controlled ditching on the ocean's surface to keep the fuselage as intact as possible. This single finding cleaved the investigative community in two. On one side were the official bodies like the ATSB, who built their search strategy around the uncontrolled dive scenario. On the other was a growing number of independent analysts, including the highly respected independent group, a collection of pilots, engineers, and satellite experts, who argued that the damage to the Flight wasn't conclusive. They maintained that a controlled ditching at the end of the flight was not only possible, but more likely. Such a ditching, they argued, would have allowed the plane to glide much further after its engines flamed out, meaning the official search zone, based on a straight plunge, could be in the wrong place entirely. The Flight, the first solid piece of evidence, had solved nothing. It had simply provided the raw material for two starkly different narratives of the flight's final moments, and then more messengers began to arrive. As if a spell had been broken, the coastlines of the Western Indian Ocean began to give up their secrets, piece by heartbreaking piece. In December 2015, a boy walking on a beach in Mozambique found a grey, honeycombed panel. It was later identified as a segment of the horizontal stabilizer from a Boeing 777, etched onto it with the stenciled words nitrogen monoxide step. In February 2016, another crucial piece washed ashore on the same stretch of Mozambican coast. This one bore a Rolls-Royce logo. It was a fragment from one of the plane's engine cowlings. The search for debris was no longer just the domain of official investigators. It was taken up by volunteers, by locals, and most notably, by an American lawyer and adventurer named Blaine Allen Gibson. Haunted by the mystery, Gibson dedicated his own time and money to combing the beaches of East Africa. His personal quest yielded extraordinary results. In Mozambique, He found a piece that was traced back to the aircraft's tail. In Madagascar, he found interior cabin panels, including a monitor frame from a seatback entertainment system. Each piece was another small nail in the coffin of the landed somewhere theories, but none carried the ultimate prize, the serial number that would definitively link it to Aircraft 9 MMRO. That was until a piece found on Mauritius, a piece of the left wing's rear spar, was found to have a unique internal date stamp, tying it directly to the manufacturing process of the missing plane. By 2017, more than 20 items of debris either confirmed or highly likely to be from MH370 had been recovered. The drift analysis became more and more refined. Oceanographers at Australia's National Science Agency, the CSIRO, conducted complex modelling, releasing replica flaperons into the ocean to see where they would travel. Their conclusions were remarkably consistent. The debris had most likely originated from a wide arc in the southern Indian Ocean, an area that overlapped with, but was perhaps slightly north of, the zone being searched by the deep-sea vessels. The ocean itself was whispering that the searchers were close, but perhaps not close enough. While debris hunters scanned the shorelines, the main event was taking place far out at sea, in the unforgiving wilderness of the Southern Ocean. The failure of the Bluefin 21 to find any wreckage in the area of the Phantom Pings had forced a total reset. The search was scaled up, funded by Malaysia, Australia, and China to the tune of over $180 million. The new search area was a colossal stretch of seabed, 120,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Greece. This vast underwater territory was defined by the latest, most sophisticated analysis of the Inmarsat data centered on the seventh arc, the line of possible locations at the time of the final satellite handshake. This was not a search, it was a siege. A small fleet of highly specialized vessels, led by the Dutch engineering firm Fugro, was deployed to conduct one of the most technologically advanced mapping operations in history. Ships like the Fugro Discovery and the Fugro Equator became the world's loneliest outposts, battling mountainous waves and screaming winds to carry out their mission. Their primary tool was a deep-tow sonar vehicle, a sophisticated, multi-million-dollar towfish that was tethered to the ship by a cable up to 10 kilometers long. This device was towed just a few hundred meters above the seabed. Flying through the dark, alien landscape of the abyss, it used side-scan sonar to paint a picture of the ocean floor, sending back acoustic images of the terrain below. The process was painstakingly slow, a methodical mowing of the lawn at a speed of just a few knots. Each pass of the towfish mapped a narrow strip of the seabed. The data was streamed back to the ship in real time, where teams of sonar analysts watched their screens 24 hours a day, their eyes trained to spot any anomaly, any shape that wasn't the natural rock and silt of the seafloor. They were looking for the unnatural signature of an aircraft wreckage field. The environment they were searching was more hostile and less understood than the surface of Mars. It was a world of perpetual darkness and crushing pressure, a landscape of towering underwater volcanoes, sheer cliffs, and deep, dark canyons. The search vessels themselves were constantly battered by the weather of the roaring 40s. Crews would be out at sea for weeks on end, enduring the isolation and the immense psychological weight of their task. They were hunting for a needle in a haystack that was underwater, miles deep, and in the middle of a hurricane. Over the months and years of the deep-sea search, there were moments of heart-stopping excitement. The sonar would return an image that didn't look natural, a cluster of hard contacts, sharp angles, and unusual shapes would appear on the screen. On several occasions, the search was paused. The ships would haul in their towfish and deploy an autonomous underwater vehicle, or AUV, a torpedo-like robot equipped with high-resolution cameras to go down for a closer look each time. Hope soared each time they were dashed. One promising field of contacts turned out to be the wreck of a 19th century sailing ship. Its wooden hull long since rotted away, leaving behind its cargo of coal and the ship's anchor. Another anomaly was a massive, isolated rock formation that had never before been mapped. The deep ocean was full of its own secrets, but it was refusing to give up the one the world was looking for. The search teams were not just mapping a potential crash site, they were charting one of the last unexplored frontiers on the planet. As the high-tech search dragged on without success, the human drama on land was reaching a fever pitch. The families of the 239 passengers and crew, bound together by a unique and terrible tragedy, evolved from a disparate group of grieving relatives into a powerful, organized and vocal advocacy group. Known as Voice 370, they became a constant, necessary thorn in the side of the authorities. They refused to let their loved ones be forgotten, and they refused to accept the official narrative without question. Led by figures like Grace Nathan, a Malaysian lawyer whose mother and Daisy was on the flight, Jackie Gonzalez, the wife of in-flight supervisor Patrick Gomez, and Zhang Hui, a Chinese man whose mother was a passenger, the families campaigned relentlessly. They held press conferences, organized remembrance events, and used social media to keep the spotlight on the search. Their primary target was the Malaysian government, whom they accused of incompetence, secrecy, and a lack of transparency. From the very beginning, they demanded the release of all data from the primary military radar tracks to the full Inmarsat logs, believing that more independent eyes on the evidence could uncover clues that officials had missed. Their frustration was fueled by a stream of conflicting information and what they perceived as a failure to properly investigate all possibilities. Why, they asked, was the pilot suicide theory pursued so vigorously when there was no concrete evidence of motive? Why was the cargo manifest not scrutinized more closely? The manifest included not just the mangosteens, but also the shipment of lithium-ion batteries, which have a known, if rare, history of causing catastrophic fires on aircraft, while the official investigation deemed the batteries were packaged according to regulations and were unlikely to be the cause. For the families, it was another unanswered question in a sea of uncertainty. In March 2015, on the first anniversary of the disappearance, the Malaysian government released an interim factual information report. The 584-page document was a detailed summary of the flight's history, the crew's background, and a timeline of events, but for the families, it was deeply unsatisfying. It offered a mountain of facts, but no analysis, no conclusions, no answers. It stated that Captain Zahari's flight simulator contained data points for a route into the southern Indian Ocean, but it stopped short of calling it a rehearsed flight plan, leaving the finding hanging in a cloud of insinuation. The report confirmed the battery of the underwater locator beacon for the flight data recorder had expired over a year before the flight, a shocking lapse in maintenance protocol. Though the beacon on the cockpit voice recorder was functional, it was a report that described the what in meticulous detail, but offered nothing on the how or the why. The anguish of the families was a constant, raw counterpoint to the sterile, technical language of the official search. They existed in a tortuous limbo, legally unable to declare their loved ones dead, yet practically unable to hold on to any real hope of their survival. They were trapped between memory and moving on, a state of unresolved grief that psychologists have a name for: ambiguous loss. Then, in January of 2017, after 2.5 years of scouring the seabed, the news that the families had been dreading finally came. The governments of Malaysia, Australia, and China announced that with the 120,000 square kilometer search area now completely mapped and finding nothing, the official, publicly funded search for Flight 370 was being suspended. The word suspended was chosen carefully. It was not ended, but for all practical purposes, the ships were being called home. The search was over. In their official statement, the three governments conceded. Despite every effort using the best science available, the search has not been able to locate the aircraft. The decision was met with devastation and anger from the families. Voice 370 called it an irresponsible act, a betrayal of the promise to bring their loved ones home. They argued that new analysis from the CSIRO, based on the recovered debris, pointed to a more likely crash site just to the north of the area that had been searched. How, they asked, could the search be abandoned when science was pointing to a new, credible location? For the search crews and the investigators at the ATSB, it was a moment of profound disappointment. They had dedicated years of their lives to the effort, pushing technology and human endurance to their absolute limits, only to be met with the unyielding silence of the deep. The mystery of MH370 was now at risk of being filed away, relegated to the cold case archives as an unsolvable enigma. But just when it seemed all hope was lost, a new player emerged from the private sector, offering one last, audacious roll of the dice. A Texas-based American company named Ocean Infinity, a leader in deep-sea exploration, stepped forward with an extraordinary proposal for the Malaysian government. They would conduct a new search. They would fund the entire multi-million-dollar operation themselves, and they would do it on a no-find, no-fee basis. The government would only have to pay them up to $70 million. If they found the main wreckage or the black boxes, it was an unprecedented gamble, a fusion of cutting-edge technology and high-stakes treasure hunting. In January 2018, the Malaysian government agreed. The search was back on. Ocean Infinity's approach was a technological leap beyond the previous effort. Their vessel, the seabed constructor, was not just towing a single sonar device. It was a mothership for a fleet of 8 advanced, hug-in autonomous underwater vehicles. These AUVs could be deployed simultaneously, descending to the depths and scouring the seabed in a coordinated swarm, covering ground far faster and more efficiently than ever before. While the previous search had taken over 2 years to cover 120,000 square kilometers, Ocean Infinity was confident they could search a similar area in just a few months. Their search area was targeted based on the latest scientific analysis. They focused on a 25,000 square kilometer zone identified by the ATSB and CSIRO as the most likely resting place, just north of the previous search zone. Hopes among the families and the aviation community surged once more. This felt like the final, best chance, if the world's most advanced commercial survey technology, searching in the area pinpointed by the latest science, couldn't find the plane, then perhaps it would never be found. For months, the seabed constructor methodically worked its way. Across the new search grid, the world waited for news. But the dispatches from the vessel were filled only with silence. The AUVs performed flawlessly, mapping the seabed in incredible detail. But the data revealed no sign of wreckage. Ocean Infinity expanded their search, eventually scanning more than 112,000 square kilometers of ocean floor, an area almost the size of England. They searched the primary area and then secondary areas, chasing down every plausible theory and expert opinion. In late May of 2018, their contract expired. The seabed constructor had found nothing, not a single piece of the aircraft. The last best hope had been extinguished. Ocean Infinity's CEO, Oliver Plunkett, called the outcome disappointing. It was a massive understatement. The failure of the Ocean Infinity search was perhaps the most baffling chapter yet in the saga. It meant that either the plane was not in the area that all the scientific analysis pointed to, or it was there, but had been missed by 2 of the most extensive and technologically advanced search efforts in human history. With the end of the Ocean Infinity search, the investigation fell into a quiet, unsettling stasis. In July 2018, the official Malaysian investigation team released its final report. The 449-page document was another exhaustive compilation of facts, but its ultimate conclusion was a stunning admission of defeat. The report stated that the investigation was unable to determine the real cause for the disappearance. It concluded that the aircraft was intentionally diverted from its flight path, and that the person or persons who did so remain unknown. The report debunked numerous conspiracy theories, but could not replace them with a definitive answer. It ruled out mechanical failure and a rogue computer system. It said there was no evidence to suggest the pilots were under unusual stress or had any psychological issues. It effectively cleared the pilots, yet simultaneously concluded that the plane's deviation from its course was not caused by an anomaly in the aircraft system, but was the result of manual inputs. Someone had flown that plane into the void. The report could not say who, it could not say why, and it could not say where. The final report was the official closing of the book on the investigation. But it left the story's central mystery entirely unresolved. The world was left with the same handful of terrifying, irreconcilable theories. The most prominent, held by many seasoned air crash investigators, remains the theory of pilot murder-suicide orchestrated by Captain Zahari. The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. The flight path appears controlled and deliberate, designed to avoid radar and lead to a remote area. Disabling the communication systems would require expert knowledge. The data from his home flight simulator, while not a smoking gun, remains deeply suspicious. But what is missing is a motive. There is no why, no note, no manifesto, no history of mental instability. His family and friends remain adamant that he was a gentle, kind man incapable of such an act. Then there is the hypoxia theory, where a fire or a slow decompression incapacitated the crew and passengers, leaving the plane to fly on as a ghost flight. This theory accounts for the long flight and the lack of a distress call, and it is supported by the ATSB's analysis of the flaperon. But it struggles to explain the deliberate turn back across Malaysia and the sequential disabling of the communication systems. These appear to be conscious acts, not the random effects of an emergency. And finally, there are the more complex theories. A controlled ditching by an unknown hijacker, or even by the pilot, far from the searched areas. This is supported by those who believe the plane could have glided much further, and that the flaperon was extended, or the persistent, shadowy theories of a cover-up, that the plane was carrying sensitive cargo that made it a target, and that its true fate has been deliberately concealed. These theories are fueled by the initial missteps and lack of transparency, but they remain entirely without concrete evidence. And so, more than a decade later, the silence from the deep remains absolute. The search has been suspended. The investigation is closed. The families are left with a collection of fragmented debris from a distant shore, and a final report that concludes the only certainty is uncertainty itself. The fate of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 has become a modern myth, a testament to the fact that for all our technology, for all our ability to connect and to track, our planet still holds corners of mystery so deep and so vast that a Boeing 777 with 239 people on board can be swallowed whole, leaving behind nothing but a question mark that hangs over the ocean forever. That question mark has proven to be an inescapable void, a gravitational point around which reason fractures and speculation thrives. When the official story ends with an admission of defeat, when the combined might of global governments and cutting-edge technology returns only silence, the human need for narrative does not simply cease, it adapts. It seeks answers in the margins, in the dissenting voices and in the dark, uncomfortable corners that the official investigation seemed content to leave unexplored. The failure to find Flight 370 did not close the book, it blew the pages wide open, inviting a world of independent researchers, disaffected experts, and amateur sleuths to write their own chapters. This new phase of the investigation began not in the pristine laboratories of transport safety bureaus, but on internet forums, in technical papers self-published by retired pilots, and in the dogged research of journalists who refused to accept "we don't know" as a final answer. The central schism, the great philosophical divide in the post-search era, returned to the plane's final moments. Was it an uncontrolled, high-speed dive, the end of a ghost flight with no one at the controls? Or was it something else, something that required a human hand at the yoke until the very end? The controlled ditching hypothesis became the cornerstone of the main alternative narrative. Its proponents argue that such a maneuver is the only explanation for the most glaring piece of negative evidence, the almost complete lack of floating debris. A high-speed impact from 35,000 feet, they contend, would have shattered the aircraft into tens of thousands of pieces, creating a vast, visible slick of wreckage, seat cushions, and other buoyant material. The fact that the most intensive surface search in history found nothing, they argue, is proof that the plane did not disintegrate. Instead, it must have been guided into a controlled landing on the water, designed to keep the fuselage as intact as possible before it sank, cold and whole, into the abyss. If this is true, the implications are profound. A controlled ditching requires a pilot, not an incapacitated one, but a living, breathing, highly skilled pilot, flying the aircraft actively until the final second. This brings the focus back, once again, to Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, but it recasts him in a different, even more complex light. This was not just a man ending his own life. This was a pilot executing one of the most difficult and precise aeronautical feats imaginable. Far from any prying eyes, proponents of this theory point to the flight path itself as evidence. The turn back across Malaysia was not erratic. It followed known navigational waypoints. The flight up the Strait of Malacca and the final turn south into the Indian Ocean were precise. This was not the work of a fire-ravaged cockpit or a hypoxic crew. This was the work of a pilot who knew exactly what he was doing. They argue the official search was flawed from the outset because it was based on the wrong endgame. An aircraft under active control could have glided for another 100 miles or more after the engines flamed out from fuel exhaustion. This would place the actual crash site far outside the 120,000 square kilometer box that was so painstakingly and fruitlessly searched. The search, they claim, failed not because of bad luck, but because of a bad assumption. The question of motive, if one assumes a controlled ditching by Captain Zahari, becomes even more tangled. Some have pointed to unconfirmed reports of his dissatisfaction with the Malaysian political situation. Could this have been an act of protest, so extreme and bizarre as to be almost incomprehensible? Could he have been trying to make a statement by hijacking his own plane and taking it to a place where it would never be found, creating a mystery the government could never solve? This narrative, while compelling, remains built on a foundation of pure speculation. The official investigation found no evidence of political radicalization, and his family has always maintained he was a dedicated professional, not a political zealot. The controversy over the flaperon also plays directly into this debate. While the official report concluded it was retracted, independent analysts, including some within the vocal independent group of experts, have disputed this. They argue the damage to the trailing edge is more consistent with it having been extended. Torn off by the force of the water during a controlled ditching, it has become an aeronautical inkblot test, where different experts see proof for their own opposing theories in the very same piece of wreckage. One of the most provocative and detailed alternative theories came from the author and air safety investigator Christine Negroni. She proposed that the initial event on board was neither a hijacking nor a pilot-led plot, but a sudden, catastrophic decompression. She speculates that an electrical failure or some other event led to a rapid loss of cabin pressure. The crew, she argues, would have been immediately hit by severe hypoxia, a lack of oxygen that severely impairs cognitive function. In this confused state, Captain Zahari, as the senior pilot, would likely have handed control to First Officer Farid Hamid while he went to investigate the problem. But the decompression, she theorizes, was so severe that it incapacitated Zahari almost instantly. Farid, left alone and also suffering from hypoxia, would have been confused and disoriented. His subsequent actions, the turn, the climb, the descent, were not those of a plotter, but of a compromised brain trying and failing to deal with a crisis it could no longer comprehend. The disabling of the communication systems, in her view, could have been an accident, the result of a fumbling, oxygen-starved pilot trying to solve a problem and only making it worse. The plane then flew on, a true ghost flight, until its fuel was exhausted. While her theory provides a non-malicious explanation for the strange flight path, it has been criticized by many pilots who argue that the aircraft's movements were too precise to have been flown by a severely hypoxic pilot. If the pilots were not responsible, the search for answers moves from the cockpit to the cabin, and even beyond the aircraft itself. This is the realm of the third entity theories, the idea that the plane was taken over by a force that was neither pilot nor mechanical failure. The most futuristic of these is the theory of a cyber hijacking. Could MH370 have been taken over remotely? Proponents of this idea point to patents and systems designed for this very purpose. In the wake of 9/11, technologies were developed that could, in theory, allow ground controllers to seize control. of an aircraft's flight systems from a hijacker. The Boeing 777 is a fly-by-wire aircraft. Its control surfaces are moved not by direct mechanical linkage, but by electronic signals. Could someone, a government agency or a sophisticated non-state actor, have hacked into the plane's flight management computer and flown it like a drone to its doom? The official investigation dismissed this, stating there was no evidence of any unauthorized remote access. Boeing has been adamant that its systems are secure, yet the theory persists, a reflection of a world where our reliance on technology carries with it a deep-seated fear of its potential for unseen manipulation. It offers an explanation for the plane's technically precise flight path without needing to incriminate the pilots. A more conventional hijacking theory circles back to the cargo hold. What if the mangosteens and lithium-ion batteries were a cover for something far more valuable or dangerous? Central to this theory are the 20 passengers on board who were employees of Freescale Semiconductor, a technology company involved in advanced microelectronics and defense contracting. Could they have been the target? Was there something in the cargo hold, a piece of military technology, a prototype, something that a rival power would go to any lengths to acquire? In this scenario, hijackers could have taken control, flown the plane to a secret location, offloaded the cargo and personnel, and then sent the aircraft on its final ghost flight into the ocean to erase the evidence. It's a plot worthy of a spy thriller, and like most such plots, it suffers from a complete lack of any verifiable evidence. But in the vacuum of information surrounding MH370, it has found fertile ground. Perhaps the darkest and most enduring of the alternative theories is that the aircraft was deliberately destroyed by military action. Proponents of this view ask a simple question: how does a 250-ton airliner fly through some of the most militarily sensitive airspace in Southeast Asia without being intercepted? The turn back across Malaysia took it close to sensitive military installations. The Malaysian Air Force saw it on their primary radar, but for reasons that have never been adequately explained, they did not scramble a fighter jet to intercept the unidentified aircraft. Could the plane have been perceived as a threat? Was it shot down by a nation that feared it was a weapon? A 9/11-style attack in the making? The most frequently mentioned potential target in this scenario is the US naval base on the remote island of Diego Garcia, a highly secretive and strategic asset in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Some flight path projections show MH370 flying in its general direction. Could the US military have shot it down to protect the base? Both the US and Malaysian governments have strenuously denied this. This theory is fueled by a handful of scattered, dismissed eyewitness accounts. An oil rig worker in the South China Sea reported seeing a burning object in the sky at around the time the plane disappeared from radar. Residents of the Maldives, far out in the Indian Ocean, claimed to have seen a low-flying, loud jumbo jet with red and blue stripes, matching the Malaysia Airlines livery, flying south on the morning of March 8th. The authorities dismissed these sightings as unreliable, but for those who believe in a cover-up, they are crucial pieces of a hidden puzzle, suggesting the plane was not where the official narrative says it was, and that its end was violent and sudden. For years, these theories circled and competed, a frantic, intellectual churn in the face of an unmoving mystery. The official search was over. The private search had failed. It seemed the story of MH370 would be forever trapped in this state of speculative limbo. And then, a retired British aerospace engineer named Richard Godfrey came forward with what he claimed was a revolutionary new way to track the plane's final flight, a breakthrough that promised to pinpoint its resting place with astonishing precision. His method did not rely on satellite pings or sonar. It relied on radio waves. For decades, a global network of amateur radio enthusiasts has been operating a system called the Weak Signal Propagation Reporter, or WSPR. It is essentially a giant, invisible web of low-power radio signals constantly crisscrossing the globe. Godfrey's ingenious idea was that an aircraft the size of a Boeing 777, flying through this dense web of signals, would act as a disturbance, like a ship creating a wake in the water. These tiny disturbances, he theorized, would be recorded in the vast, publicly available WSPR archive. He believed he could track the plane by looking for its ghostly electronic trail. Godfrey spent more than a year engaged in an almost superhuman feat of data analysis. He sifted through millions of archived data points, looking for anomalous seismical disturbances along the projected flight path of MH370 during the specific time window of its disappearance, and he found them. His analysis produced a detailed flight path that was remarkably consistent with all the known evidence, the military radar tracks, the Inmarsat satellite data, and a drift analysis from the recovered debris. But Godfrey's track included details the other data could not provide. Most dramatically, it showed the aircraft, about 6 hours into its ghost flight over the Indian Ocean, entering a holding pattern. For approximately 20 minutes, the plane appeared to circle, as if waiting for instructions or for the sun to rise. This was not the action of a simple, uncontrolled ghost flight. This suggested a pilot was still in control, a detail that, if true, would completely upend the official narrative. After this strange holding pattern, the track showed the plane continuing south before finally ending. Based on this complex web of data, Richard Godfrey proposed a new, precise crash location. It was a point on the 7th arc, at a latitude of 33.177 degrees south, about 1,900 kilometers west of Perth, and crucially, it was just outside the area that had been searched by both the official, government-led hunt and the private search by Ocean Infinity. It lay in an area of extremely challenging underwater terrain, full of canyons and ridges, a place where a wreckage field could easily have been missed if a search vessel passed just a few kilometers to the side. Godfrey's work has been met with both excitement and skepticism. Some experts have hailed it as a brilliant piece of lateral thinking, a plausible new lead in a case that has gone cold. Ocean Infinity, the company that conducted the last search, has taken it seriously, stating that Godfrey's analysis aligns with their own, and that they are willing to mount a new no-find, no-fee search of the area he has identified. But government bodies, including the ATSB, have remained cautious, stating that while the theory is credible, it is not yet definitive enough to warrant launching another massive, publicly funded search. And so, the world waits again. The fate of any new search rests with the Malaysian government, which must decide whether to once more take a gamble on hope, to roll the dice on a new theory that promises to finally solve the puzzle. The technology exists. The will of the searchers is there. The families are pleading for one last effort. The mystery of MH370 has arrived at a new crossroads, poised between the possibility of a final, astonishing discovery and the prospect of being eternally lost to the silence. The unanswered questions remain as stark and as painful today as they were in the first weeks of the tragedy. Who was in control of the aircraft during its final, phantom flight? Was it Captain Zahari, First Officer Farik, or an unknown third party? What was the motive? Was it an act of mass murder-suicide, a political protest, a botched hijacking, or something so alien to our understanding of human behavior that we lack the framework to even comprehend it? Why that specific, lonely flight path? A route that seems deliberately designed for disappearance? Why the complete and utter silence from the cockpit? And the ultimate question, the one that holds the key to all the others: where is the wreckage? Where are the flight data recorders that hold the final, objective truth of what happened in that cockpit? What were the final moments of the 239 souls on board like? Did they know their fate, or did they slip away in a silent, hypoxic sleep, blissfully unaware of the abyss that awaited them? The legacy of Flight 370 is a deep and permanent scar on the map of modern aviation. It was a brutal wake-up call, a shattering of the illusion that in the 21st century, a commercial airliner could not simply vanish. In its wake, the aviation industry has been forced to change. The International Civil Aviation Organization has implemented new standards, creating the Global Aeronautical Distress and Safety System, or GADSS. This system mandates that aircraft must report their position every 15 minutes in normal circumstances, and every single minute if they are in distress, the search for black boxes that can be ejected from an aircraft before impact, or that can stream their data to the ground in real time, has been accelerated. Never again, the industry vowed, should a plane be allowed to become a ghost. But the most profound and enduring legacy is the human one. It lives in the faces of the families, in the quiet dignity of their unrelenting fight for answers. They are the guardians of the memory of the 239. For them, this has never been a mystery to be solved, it has been a wound to be healed. And without truth, without a final resting place for their loved ones, that wound can never truly close. They are victims of the ultimate cruelty of ambiguous loss, forced to exist in a permanent twilight between hope and despair, unable to mourn, unable to move on, with a ghost forever sitting at their dinner table. In the end, the story of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 transcends aviation. It is a humbling, terrifying parable about the limits of human knowledge and the vast, indomitable power of the natural world. It reminds us that for all our satellites and our science, we are small creatures on a very large planet, and that the ocean, which holds the origins of life, can also hold our deepest secrets. Somewhere, in the crushing pressure and the eternal night of the abyss, a Boeing 777 lies silent. It holds the truth. It holds the final words. It holds the final piece of 239 souls. Until the day it is found, their story will remain what it is now, the greatest mystery of our time. A question whispered on the wind, a silent testament to the fact that some secrets, once taken by the sea, may never be given back. The ocean keeps its counsel, and the world is left only to wonder.